Today I'm going to talk about Timecard. Timecard is a system that helps developers control end-to-end delays in mobile applications, especially in apps that talk to the cloud. This is joint work with Jeetu and Ratul at Microsoft Research and my advisor Hari Balakrishnan. For most cloud services today, we know that a majority of their requests come from smartphones and mobile apps. And there are tons of interactive mobile apps out there today that rely on a variety of cloud services. For these interactive mobile applications, response time matters because users are impatient and you cannot keep them waiting for long. In fact, what matters from the user's perspective is the time between when they interact with the app, say go click that button, and when they see the response back on the screen. This time between the user interaction and the rendering of results on the screen is the user perceived delay. So to keep your users happy, the developer should be able to tightly control this user perceived delay. For an interaction that talks to the cloud, this delay actually has many components. For example, you have app processing delay because before the request is being sent to the server. You have a networking delay before the request reaches the server. You have server delays. And again, on the downstream, you have a networking delay and processing delay to render the results. So if you want to tightly control the end-to-end delay, the one interesting place of control you can have is control how much time the server spends on the request. Because that's where the core logic of the processing is, and reducing the delay is going to reduce your overall delay. This is what we propose in this work, and this is in fact consistent with what developers try to do today. They try to put in a lot of effort to tightly manage their server delays. For instance, when a request hits a server, they try to keep a deadline or an SLA and control their server processing in a way that they respond back within the deadline. They are able to do this because servers are built in a flexible way. They can trade off on the quality of the result for the processing time. So if you have more time to process, you can get better quality results. Many search-like services have this trade-off property. This is an example. They spawn off multiple workers, and they respond back as soon as the deadline hits, irrespective of the number of workers that came back. So if you have a larger deadline, they'll aggregate data from more workers, and you can get a better result. This is great, that servers are able to manage their delays today. But here's the problem. Today, these deadlines are set to a fixed value. They are set with either no consideration for external delays, or they just assume some constant external delay. What they are missing to account for is when a lot of your clients are smartphones and mobile apps, there's significant variability in the external delay. These delays are highly variable, as we showed with App Insight last year. The variability comes from several factors. Here are a few examples. For example, your app could spend a variable amount of time trying to read sensors, get your GPS location out of your GPS. Your smartphone radio could have gone to sleep, so it could incur a variable amount of time trying to wake up the radio. As we all know, a smartphone can connect to many different networks, 3G, LTE, Wi-Fi, and there is diverse environmental conditions in the wild that it introduces significant variability in network transfer times. And there's a lot of other delays as well that contribute to these external delays. Today, servers do not account for these delays. So what happens is when a client has a high external delay, you are going to get poor end-to-end response time. And for a client with low external delay, you do not produce the best quality result as possible. So in this work, we are taking a position that, you know what, servers should consider external delays when they adapt, and they should adapt. Instead of keeping a fixed deadline, we are basically taking a position that they should adapt and control an end-to-end deadline, because that is what matters to the user when they click the button and when they see the results on the screen. To enable servers to do this, we have built Timecard. Note that if you want a server to adapt to external delays, you at least need to give them two pieces of information. When a request comes to the server, you have to tell them about the delays on the left, which is how much delays got incurred when the request hits the server. And you also have to give them some notion or prediction on how much delays it is going to incur, which is when you send out a response, how long it's going to take to render the response. This is exactly what Timecard does. It provides two simple APIs that a developer can query at any point in the server. The first API is getElapsedTime. It tells you the elapsed time between when the user clicked the button and when the request hit the server. And the second API is to predict remaining time, which is for a given response size, we want to predict how much time it's going to take to go transfer over the network and render on the phone. So if we provide these two deadlines, two APIs, so now the server can go and adapt. For example, if you have a desired end-to-end delay, a server could query these two APIs and adapt their processing time in a way that they fit within the deadline. They can also adapt their response so that they send a particular response size that fits within this delay. Now note that if you have a faster client, these two APIs will tell you that you can spend more time on the server to give a better quality result without going over the deadline. Providing precise answers to these two APIs is actually very challenging, because this representation of a user request is very simple. In practice, it's not so simple. For instance, mobile apps are highly asynchronous. They can span several asynchronous calls and threads. Even servers are complicated. They can span several workers and worker threads. So if an app makes a request, you should be able to have a way to tie that this request was made because of this user interaction. And when a server sends back a response, you have a similar problem. You should be able to tie it to the user request and in turn tie it back to the app. You have the same problem downstream. To put it another way, you should be able to track this entire thing as a single transaction. Even if you are able to track this entire thing as a transaction, providing elapsed time between the client and the server is not easy, because you don't have a single reference clock. And providing prediction of a remaining time is challenging as well, because you have high variability in network delays and processing delays. Timecard solves all these challenges, and it has these three big components. And we have put together a system that is extremely easy to use. When a developer writes a service, he can just include the timecard DLL and use these two APIs. He can specify an end-to-end delay and deploy the service to the cloud. It is even easier to use timecard in a mobile app. The developer doesn't have to do anything. We have a binary instrumentation framework, which is similar to App Insight, that just automatically includes all the timecard components into the app. So the developer can just put the instrumented app in the App Store, and when users download it, the app and the server is jointly going to manage end-to-end delays. Now I'll dive a little bit deeper into how we solve these challenges using these three components. I'll first talk about transaction tracking. Our challenge here is to track this whole execution into a single transaction. So we want to track across thread boundaries at the server and at the app, and we also want to track between the app and the server. To do this, our key idea is the following. We are going to attach what we call a transaction context to every thread in its thread local storage. And this transaction context is going to carry along timestamps and the other transaction information. And we are going to pass, we call this transaction context TC, and we are going to pass this TC along as the execution is progressing between these threads and between the app and the server. To tell you in a little more detail, when a user interacts with the app, it's going to call an event handler, at which point we are going to create a new transaction context, timestamp the start of the transaction, and attach it to the thread. Now when the app makes an asynchronous call, we are going to pass this TC from the calling thread to the callback thread. We're going to use the detouring techniques we developed in App Insight to do this. Now when an app makes a HTTP request, we want to transmit the TC from the app to the server. We do this by putting a special HTTP header. We are going to serialize the TC and put it in the header. And when the server receives a TC, it's going to extract this header and attach it to the server thread. In the server, we are going to do similar techniques as in the client to pass the TC along and pass it back to the app. Now note that since the TC is attached to every thread, at any point in the server or in the client, a thread can introspect about what transaction it belongs to. And since the TC carries along timestamps, we can answer get elapsed time, of course, if the time between the app and the server is synced. We know that they are not synced. That brings us to solving the next challenge. Our challenge here is we want to bring the phone or the app and the server into a single reference clock. Syncing the server to a global clock is not a hard problem in a data center, right? So let's just focus on the phone. You would assume that the phone already syncs with the cell tower, and the cell tower could sync with a GPS or a global clock. It turns out that it doesn't happen, actually. They are off by several seconds to actually minutes. Another option is to just use the GPS on the phone. But you know what? It doesn't work indoors at all. That's where you spend most of your time in. So the only approach to resort to is some kind of a probing-based approach like NTP. This is exactly what we do. In fact, instead of sending to a general probing server, we just use the current server we are communicating with. We are going to send these probes, and we are going to use a standard technique from literature to calculate the clock offset and the clock drift between the smartphone clock and the server clock. So now the smartphone can just timestamp with the server as the reference clock. But this is all good, but here is the interesting observation. Most of these probing-based techniques assume that your probes have symmetrical delays in the uplink and the downlink. If you're going to have asymmetry, your clock sync is going to have large errors. It turns out that in smartphones connected to cellular networks, if you're not careful, you're always going to end up with such asymmetric probes. Here is the reason. The smartphone radios are designed to be extremely energy efficient. So they operate in multiple energy modes. If you have no data to send, the smartphone is going to be asleep, sitting in the idle mode. Now if you send a probe packet, it's going to incur a delay to wake up the radio before sending the probe. Now if you account this probe for time sync, you have a large asymmetric delay in the uplink. So the ideal time to send a probe would be when the radio is already active. So you won't incur any delays on the uplink. But here's the problem. Your radio might be active because you are downloading some data. There is some network traffic going on. And you should note that most cellular base stations implement per user queues. This is good and bad. This is good because you won't be affected by other people's traffic, but it's bad because you'll incur significant extra delay just from your own traffic. So you're going to incur a queuing delay if there is a traffic that's going to already be going on. So if you probe when there is traffic, you're going to incur significant extra delay on the downlink. So here is the experiment that we did on a single phone over a course of multiple days. This shows the RTTs of the probes as a CDF. And the vertical line there shows the minimal RTT we saw in the experiment. And this line shows the probes that were made when the network was already busy. You can see that there is significant extra delay when you probe during that time, and there is high variability. And this line shows the probe that were sent when the radio was idle. You can see that there is significant extra delay here as well. In fact, the radio wake up can take up to 2 seconds if the radio is in actually a low power idle mode. So if you account for these probes, you're going to have large errors. So the ideal time to probe is probably when the radio is already active and there is no network traffic going on. So you have to be both radio aware and traffic aware. How do we find such a time? If you think of the entire execution of the app as a sequence of transactions like these, probably the best place to probe is here. Because the app just received data, so your radio hasn't gone back to sleep, and you don't have any outstanding network traffic going on. But when you have complex transactions and no visibility into the radio or traffic state, how do you find such a location? Here's where our transaction tracking comes to the rescue. Since we track every thread and every asynchronous call in the app, we can exactly give a callback when we know that a network transaction is over and there is no other outstanding network call in the app. Since most smartphones, now this is the place you want to probe. Now, since most smartphones run only one app in the foreground, this app level heuristics turns out to work really well. Now you can see the graph with time card plotted. You can see that time card incurred very, very low extra delays compared to the min RTT. In fact, our controlled experiments show that time card can achieve an accuracy of less than or equal to 5 milliseconds. So now we are able to sync time and track transactions. We can give accurate answers to get elapsed time. So let's shift our focus to the right, which is, this is the hard problem. How do we predict how much time is going to be spent when you send a response out? We are going to split this problem into two. We are going to separately predict how much the downlink delay is and separately predict what the app processing delay is going to be. I'm just going to talk about how we predict the downlink delay, and you can read in our paper how we predict the app processing delay. The problem here is, for a particular response size to be sent, we want to know how much is the transfer time going to be. Of course, the transfer time is going to be dependent on the response size and all other parameters of the network. Since cellular networks have highly varying throughput, How do we do prediction robustly, right? It's very hard. But here is what we observed. We analyzed about 4,000 apps in the App Store, and we found that in most of these interactive apps, the transfer sizes are extremely short. In fact, the median is only 3 kilobytes, and the 90th percentile is only 37 kilobytes. Since cellular networks have high bandwidth, they have rare loss, but very high latency. These transfers are simply going to be dominated by the latency and not the throughput. We also, of course, found that almost all these transfers go over HTTP, which is in turn goes over TCP. And when you have high latency for these short transfer sizes, your TCP parameters are going to matter. Especially a TCP window state at the server is going to matter. Here's an example. Suppose you want to send out 5 packets, and the TCP window starts at 2. You will send out only 2 packets to start with. You will get the ACKs back and then send out the 3 packets. Because of the TCP window state, now you basically incurred an extra round trip. Since you have high latency in cellular networks, this is basically an addition of a significant delay. Based on these observations, we basically figured out that, you know what, to find these network transfer times, you can find it out, but it's primarily determined by this RTT and number of round trips. If you are able to predict these 2 quantities, you'll be able to predict how much the network transfer time is going to be. Predicting RTT is not very hard. You can use some recent estimate of RTT because RTT in this network doesn't change a lot over time unless you're driving very fast. So we simply use some time sync probes that we were sending to compute these RTTs. At first glance, predicting the number of round trips is also not hard either, because you can simply read the TCP window state of the server to come up with a good estimate of the number of round trips it's going to take. But it turns out that this technique does not work, because almost all cellular networks deploy middle boxes. They're going to split your TCP connection when you're going to send networking data, right? So it's not the window size at the server that matters. It's actually the window size at the middle box that matters. And there is no easy way to estimate what the window size of the middle box is going to be. I also want to note that different providers deploy different middle boxes. Some start with a window size of 2, some starts with actually 3, which is very odd, and so on, right? So we decided to build an empirical data-driven model to basically learn about these middle boxes. So we built a predictor at the server, which continuously learns from data collected from time card enabled apps. We built a simple decision tree model. The 2 obvious parameters to this decision tree model is, of course, response size and your recent RTT, because that's going to affect your transfer time. To learn separately about different network providers, we also have network provider into the model. But here is the most interesting parameter. We came up with one high-level parameter, which basically will try to describe what the middle box behavior is going to be. We simply kept track of the number of bytes transmitted over the connection to learn about the TCP state in the middle box. The main intuition here is that TCP window grows as you transfer more data. So this is basically the idea here. So you can use this high-level parameter as a proxy for learning the window state at the middle box. So if we have more and more data, we exactly can reverse engineer what the middle box is trying to do. It turns out that our intuition worked really well. We evaluated our predictor with tons of data. We had data from 2 cities, from 250,000 downloads, from almost all major providers. We also experimented with different navigation modes and different conditions. And we split the data in many different ways to train and test. And these are the key results here. Our median error in Wi-Fi is just 12 milliseconds, and our 90th percentile error is only 31 milliseconds. In cellular networks, we did good as well, which is our median error is only 17 milliseconds, and our 90th percentile is only 86 milliseconds. This represents an error of actually less than 20%. Of course, the prediction becomes bad as you have longer transfers, but I just said they're very uncommon in these apps. So now that we can predict the downlink delay, if we can predict the app processing delay as well, we can now answer that question of predict remaining time. We have a very similar and interesting predictor for app processing delay, which also gives very low errors. You should read about it in the paper. So the output of the predict remaining time is just going to be the addition of these 2 predictors. Now that we can answer both questions, we can adapt the server. Suppose your desired end-to-end delay is D, and the answers to these 2 questions are E and R. Now I can come up with a deadline at the server, which is basically the difference between the desired end-to-end delay and these 2 quantities. Now this is the deadline at the server to manage an end-to-end deadline. To evaluate this, we did an end-to-end deployment of 2 services. These are two existing services. We just modified them to use time card. The first service is a contextual mobile ad service. This service basically provides contextual ads to mobile apps. You can see that there is a restaurant ad, which is a very relevant ad to actually the content of the page. The way the service works is, when a user goes to a page, it basically extracts keywords out of the page, sends keywords up, and the server basically processes these keywords, queries an ad provider multiple times for different combination of keywords, and it's going to send you the best ad out, and the ad gets rendered on the phone. This service is exactly similar to one of these search services, where it can trade off on the quality of the result for the processing time, because it's spawning off many workers. This graph here shows that as you spend more time at the server, you're going to get a better ad. So this service initially had a static deadline of 1 second. After 1 second, they respond back. We modified it to use time cards so that they bound an end-to-end delay. So we basically adapt the processing time. So we evaluated this service in many different ways, but I'm going to just show you one key result here. So we set a target delay of 1.2 seconds, and you can see that without time card, there is significant variability in the end-to-end delay. This is because there is significant variability in the external delays, and the server is only spending a constant amount of time. This is with time card. As you can see, with time card, about 90% of the time, we can stay within 50 milliseconds of the target delay, because now the server is adapting to these external delays. Similarly, we also instrumented a Twitter analysis service, which is already in the App Store for the last 2 years. We simply included time card in it. This service is very similar to the previous service, that it can adapt the processing and produce a better quality result. So the errors go down as you spend more time at the server. So in addition to adapting the processing time, in this service, we also adapted the response. So here are the key results of it. Even here, as you can see, we are able to tightly control the end-to-end delay with time card. And without time card, you have even significant variability in this service. So though we include a lot of components into time card, we have managed to keep the overhead very low. Time card has only 0.1% runtime overhead, and less than 1% memory overhead and network overhead. And we have negligible server overhead and battery overhead. Time card does have some limitations. Because we use a data-driven model for both the predictors for remaining time, we need a bootstrapping phase. So the predictor for downlink delay, we can learn from multiple apps because it's independent of the app, so we can learn it very fast. But the app processing delay predictor needs app-specific information. So our solution is just turn off the adaptation till we have enough data to be able to predict. Of course, an app can have complex transactions. There can be multiple parallel and serial requests. So in this complex case, note that elapsed time will still work, but we need to do more work to predict because you need to model these complex transactions, and also we need some developer help to apportion these delays. So before I conclude, I want to note that we did time card to adapt the processing time to control the quality of the result. You can use time card for several other things. You can adapt the resources used. You can put a slower client on a faster mission. You can also use it to prioritize requests. For example, when multiple requests come to a server, you can use time card to find all their deadlines and build a scheduler and try to meet the end-to-end deadlines of everybody. Right? So to conclude, I just want to conclude with one very simple takeaway, which is that for any system or a system component that wants to control end-to-end delays, at a high level, you need two components. You need to find out how much time has elapsed till now so that you know the delays incurred. And you also need another prediction component, because since you're adapting only this component, you need to predict how much time it's going to take for the if you send a response out, right? So if you have these two components, you can apply time card in any context. For example, even for a standalone program or a database query or even a data center job. In fact, if you think about it, we use time card in our real life whenever we have a deadline. For example, we had a SOSP deadline, and we figured out that, a lot of time has elapsed. And we had some prediction on, okay, if the paper is going to go this way, how much time it's going to take, and you keep adapting the quality of the paper. Right? So I just want to leave you with here. Thanks.
That was also an amazingly precisely timed talk.
I applied time card to my talk as well.
Nice talk, Fitz Nolan, Yale University. One thing I'm wondering about is if you could sort of extend this to keep a continuous connection after that initial response. I'm
Sure.
thinking like Amazon product pages, they'll preload that first view.
So these are the complex transactions I talked about.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have a solution for it right now because you have to model these complex interactions. Or if you are going to have serial transactions between the server, we need developer help to put markers of how much delays each should take.
Yeah, or maybe like a priority
A
on
priority,
the response.
exactly.
You know, get
Exactly. We need some developer help to put markers there. Yes.
Thanks.
Moderated question. Controlling the server-side delay makes sense only if that delay is an important fraction of the end-to-end delay. Have you done any field study to determine the typical range of such fractions in environments with various connection quality?
This is a great question. Yes, we did try to study the end-to-end delays for some mobile apps by looking at how much time they spend. And for a lot of them, they spend more than 1 or 2 seconds, which is actually a significant part of the end-to-end delay. Of course, the question is time card useful when you already have a 30 millisecond server delay? Probably not.
Hi,
Me?
Mike Friedman, Princeton. I guess it was really to follow up these questions about complex interaction. My understanding with when you're doing web performance optimization, it's generally the interaction between tens of objects you're trying to, or hundreds of objects. They're not only to one server, many servers, third-party CDNs.
There can be multiple servers. Yes.
So I guess I'm kind of asking the question, which is related to how much does the one server time matter, but actually how much can you actually even predict given that
You're completely right. It's like prediction is going to be really hard because there's going to be complex interactions between the responses that they are going to send. But since our prediction is already learning this stuff, we might be able to learn these complex interactions.
But we need to know about cache hits on CDNs and where the client and
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's going to work. Yes.
Thanks.
The elapsed time is going to work because elapsed time is very simple. You're going to just do transaction tracking and you're going to sync the time. So that's always going to work. Prediction might not work, yes.
Kaushik P. Raghavan, Facebook. The question that I have is, on your client, do you find that as the app version changes, or even over weeks or months as cell towers and cellular networks and everything behind you might be changing or upgrading and so on, how good is your predictive model?
Yeah,
how much you need to retrain it?
We didn't evaluate it. That's a good question as well. We might need to relearn it when the app version changes. We have a way to identify a transaction type. So if the app version changes, we'll just start learning about a new transaction type, not the old one.
What if your app changes twice a day?
Why will your app change twice a day?
Facebook, we push out new versions of the app, very often. On the web, it changes twice a day.
It's a developer framework, right? So we want Facebook to basically tell us that this is a new transaction because I have changed the app. That's the idea. This is a developer framework, right? We are not automatically trying to.
Well, I mean, friction, right? You spoke a lot about how you're minimizing friction to adoption, and I'm trying to point out to you that this is actually it's something
Your
interesting.
question is right in terms of what if the middle boxes change. Yes, we have to relearn the entire middle box because we would have built a predictive model for a particular middle box. But when the app changes, the developer can tell us that it's a new transaction type.
Hundreds of developers, and it's spiky, right? It's not like a constant thing. Yeah, no follow-up. I know.
Hi, Rich Draves, Microsoft. So in your CDF for the mobile ads, it was very pretty and very nicely centered on your target deadline. But the CDF for the Twitter sentiment analysis was a lot messier and kind of offset, and I was curious why it didn't work out as well.
That is a really good question. There is one detail that...
It's not showing up, so just talk.
No, actually I have to show it.
Can we have the video again, please?
So the problem about the Twitter is that we were able to adapt the processing time only at the steps of 150 milliseconds. So you can either fetch 100 tweets from Twitter or 200 tweets from Twitter. And that delay was 150 milliseconds. So if you can see here, we are within that 150 millisecond, which is still a good adaptation. So that is the reason. We couldn't do a continuous adaptation like the ad server, where you can spend 99
I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, let's thank our speaker.